to become who we want to be as individuals. And at the end of the day, that's going to help us be a successful offense.
Man-to-man, one-on-one coverage because the safety rolls to Jefferson's side.
Jordan Love hit me up the night of the draft, just congratulated me, let me know it's time to work. A.J. Dillon was open arms.
Von Rock caught a ball with his thighs. We didn't even talk about that.
It was more of with his ass.
If he throws a good ball, this is a running, catching touchdown untouched.
Like, KP does like these flips after every win, and I'm like just waiting for him to do his flip.
To know that we still love each other, that's what football brings us.
Across the safety's face.
You can tune in anywhere that you guys follow us on social media. To the Practice Squad podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Mark. We are underway with the draft prep, combine season, free agency just right around the corner. Good stuff, plenty to talk about. You have to be thankful for it in a football offseason. Mark, how you doing today?
It's football in short season, man. It's the most irrelevant, false hype time of year every single year. Some GMs will fall for it. Some owners will fall for it. Coaches fall for it. Fans for sure fall for it. It's fun to watch. But, John, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
Misinformation.
It doesn't really matter.
It's
misinformation. It's like, you can confirm some of the things that you might have thought about prospects. Like, oh, he looks fast on game tape. Oh, he ran a fast 40. That makes sense. But there's going to be guys like, for example, Keon Coleman. He ran a 4.6 40, which is slower than people were expecting him to run. But he had the fastest gauntlet time. So when he was playing real football, running and catching the ball in that drill, he was the fastest through that drill of any receiver. Xavier Worthy was the fastest combine player ever, right? But when he went through the gauntlet, why wasn't he the fastest? Because football speed is different. Game speed on film in a real football game with pads on where you can get hit, where you're blocking, where you're doing all the things that football requires you to do is different than track, right?
So Mark is coming in fired up already, and we went on this tangent. Yeah, you're coming in very hot, but I agree with you. And we went on this tangent last year during draft season, and I think Mark and I, generally speaking, we have a decent pulse on how that translates to the NFL. These combine numbers, as Mark is saying, they really don't matter. Now, people's stock will rise as a result of the combine. People's stock will fall as a result of the combine, but. And look, anybody that's good at drafting, right? You take teams that just historically are really good at drafting and developing players in-house, right? Take a look at the Rams, recently the Lions, KC, the Saints, for Packers, right? All of these guys have gotten up on a podium multiple times before and have said, we don't care what dudes are doing in their pajamas. We care about what they're doing on football film and how they do in their interviews from a personality and tangible perspective. Any team that is historically good at drafting, that's the narrative they come in with. Then you get these flashy players, right? Anthony Richardson, who comes in and does some crazy measurables. Xavier Worthy, who, by the way, I think is a great receiver, but is he skyrocketing up draft boards right now because he ran a 4.21? Sure is. Does it matter? Absolutely not. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
He's the thing with Xavier Worthy. Yeah, he's fast, football fast as well. Like you put on his tape, and that was one of those ones that where it confirms it. But people get confused. They're like, oh, John Ross when he ran that 4.22, right, and that was at the time the fastest 40 time in combine history. His game didn't necessarily translate to the league. Yeah. He had some flashy moments, as you would expect with someone with that kind of speed. But his in and out of the breaks, his consistent catching, consistently getting open and blocking is why he's out of the league now. So it's like. Okay, he ran the fastest 40 time we've ever seen, and he was in the league for, I think, less than 4 years.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, Worthy, I think everybody considered him a solid receiving prospect going into the combine. So him running a 4.21 doesn't mean that, he's showing flash that doesn't show up on tape. He's a damn good receiver. But there are people where he is skyrocketing up the draft boards right now in GM or coaching rooms just because of the fact that he ran that fast 40, and that should be point number 15 on why he's worth drafting, right? And what Mark's saying, catching ability, route running ability, blocking ability, football IQ, and, personality traits, all those things should probably come before just the fact that he ran the fastest for you.
And even funnier, John, and we can get into, more combine specific, player specific stuff here in a second, but just combine in general, even funnier than just receivers running a 40, which, let's be honest, as a former receiver, I don't think there was a single time in my life where I sprinted without any sort of having to maneuver left to right at all, 40 yards. Like maybe after you catch, a wide open play and there's nobody behind you. But at that point, you're already going to score anyway, unless you're super, super slow. So it's like, I don't remember a time where you ever have to sprint with perfect track form, with a track start, 40 yards. You have to run vertical routes where you bend a little bit. You have to stem your routes. Like, that's not running full speed in a straight line. And better than just receivers, DBs almost never do it because they're backpedaling and reacting to what receivers do. Linemen never do it because they're blocking and it doesn't matter. Linebackers are reacting to where the players are going. And
more lateral agility.
Yeah, their football speed is going to be different because it's how you react, it's angles, it's all those things. So the 40-yard dash is at the end of the day, it is probably the most irrelevant thing they do at the combine. If I'm seriously, like, it probably is the most irrelevant for every position. Receiver, okay, yeah, they can run, but again, you almost never run a straight line 40 yards.
Yeah, people are knocking Corum because he ran a 4.5 40. I have watched so many downs of Blake Corum being able to make great cuts to power through a linebacker and break a tackle. All those matter way more than him being a 4.5 running back versus a 4.4 running back. And then you mentioned lineman, right? Now, look, I'll say this. I love the big man running the 40 because of the fact that it's like, holy shit, you're 300 pounds and you're running, a roughly 5-second 40 or something like that. It's crazy to watch, but does it matter? Absolutely not. I couldn't think of a more irrelevant thing than a lineman seeing how quickly he can run a vertical sprint for 40 yards. But it's
what's funny, John, is as you mentioned that, Tavondre Sweat, Texas, like that freak, he's
366 pounds. Yep.
Yeah. He jumped a 25-inch vertical was, and that's higher than my last ever recorded vertical in college. Now, I was coming off of an injury, and as you can tell, I'm white, so my bounce might not be where it needs to be as a receiver. But yeah, that just to give you perspective, I'm 6 foot 190 at the time, and he's 366, out jumping me. So,
dude, I am very high on Sweat as a nose tackle. Like I think he's truly a special player. His ability to actually generate a good pass rush is above average for somebody his size, and his ability to plug up the run game is ridiculous. Like, he's a dude. I would love to see him be a Lion. I'm not sure, how high he's going to be on draft boards, just given positional value and all that stuff, but I think whatever team selects him, I truly think he's a special player. Speaking of other people that just, maybe had good combines or whatever, JJ McCarthy, obviously, I think really impressed at the combine. Now there's, his long ball wasn't the greatest thing in the world out of throwing stuff like that. But again, like, I don't think anybody expects him to be the dude with the biggest laser cannon rocket arm compared to other prospects, but he had the 5th most athletic. I'm forgetting what drill he ran, but he had the 5th fastest drill.
The 3-cone, the L drill, which is ridiculous. Like, as a quarterback to have a top 5 or 6 all combine, like I'm talking all combine, that's ridiculous. So his change of direction, obviously he's been interviewing off the charts. We kind of expected that. John, did you notice most of the times that he was asked interview questions, it was like, hey, who'd you want to throw to? He specifically picked Seattle receiver, Vikings receiver, Raiders receiver, teams that are very much in play and drafting him early. He is so smart. He's obviously well coached with his agent, and he has the right people behind him helping him. But his draft stock is flying up. Not only because he did pretty well at the combine physically, he threw pretty well. Did you see he had the second hardest throw behind Joe Milton, which Joe Milton was only 1 mile per hour behind Josh Allen, and then JJ McCarthy was only 2 miles per hour behind Josh Allen. So in terms of arm strength, people that were saying that JJ doesn't have the same arm as Drake May or Caleb Williams or any of those guys, flat out not true. Flat out can throw.
He might not be the same guy to throw, a 60, 70-yard bomb. But again, how often are you doing that? Or that's required of you? Not really. If you can throw a very hard fastball 30 yards, that is going to do the job.
And again,
99% of the time.
a pretty dumb drill, because again, this isn't baseball. It's not about how fast you throw the ball, but it can show you how much power you can generate behind the ball. And I also don't know if JJ weighs 220. JJ, his whole college career, he's on the skinnier side. He's still kind of a boy. He's growing up. you got to remember he's still not even 21 years old yet. So he's like still kind of growing into his own, and he's 220 now. So he's
I do want to take a
room.
look at this too. I saw this picture. Bo Nix looks like he's 35 in this picture.
That's because he is almost 35. He's played 6 years of college football.
Like I thought this was like an analyst at the when I first saw this really quick. I'm like, what do they put? Like, what's who are these people? And then I realized it was Bo Nix. I was like, oh man, like, and putting him next to McCarthy and Penix, who I think both look younger for their age, anyways. I was like, oh, poor Bo. But it just made me laugh when I was scrolling past it on Twitter earlier today.
So, John, we have obviously JJ as one of the standouts at the combine. Mike Sarin still had another good standout, another Michigan guy. His stock rose, did really well in the drills. You mentioned Blake Corum. Most bench press reps by any running back. Blake Corum was great in exchange of direction drills. Obviously, his 40 was a bit of a letdown, but I don't really look into that too much. We talked about Xavier Worthy breaking the 40-yard dash record, which is very cool. And yes, he's going to climb up the draft boards because of it, but he was already going to be a second, third round pick. He might sneak into the first round now. But that's on top of his production he already showed on film.
Yeah.
What I think what stood out to me more was some of these bigger receivers that are running in the 4.4s. Like that to me, being 6'2", like Brian Thomas from LSU, being 6'2", 6'3", almost 220 pounds, 215, 210, running 4.4 is more impressive to me than a very skinny dude like Xavier Worthy running the fastest combine record we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like being that big, also paired with that speed, also being able to jump and run routes at those sizes, that to me always stands out more. And we had several guys that are big receivers, ex-receivers that, tested really, really well. Anyone else stand out to you in terms of, I know the offensive line's going today, doing a lot of drills.
Yeah.
Chop
Robinson, I think has gone up the draft board a bit, not so much for his athletic performance, but from what it sounds like he interviewed incredibly well, like just showed, high character, high football IQ. And then top of it, his measurables, I think were to be what they were expected to be. So I've been hearing a lot of chatter around him. Kool-Aid McKinstry, unfortunately, had a fracture in his foot, so that actually stopped him from doing all the athletic drills. He's going to do more of them at his pro day, but same thing. Like heard he interviewed well and all that stuff. So he's kind of going up the draft board a bit. And I'll just take a second to defend Keon Coleman too. As you said, disappointing 40 time, and I think his stock is actually going to lower as a result of that. But watch the tape, man. Like, watch how that dude plays football. He's a damn good receiver.
He's one of the best neutral ball go-getters.
Yeah, just as an ex-receiver, man. Like, is he a first-round guy as a result of his combine showing? Maybe not. I think that's all the more reason that he could be a day 2 steal. I think he's one of the better ex-receivers in this class, and that's a tough position to play. And I'm going to use that as a way to segue into free agency. Mike Evans, obviously, like it sounds like there's a very low probability that he's staying in Tampa at this point. They're not in agreement on a contract. He's essentially been given permission to, go seek elsewhere. Tyron Smith, who has been a starter for Dallas for, I think, 12 or 13 years, is going to walk. They're not going to re-sign. Zach Wilson, it sounds like, has been given permission to seek a trade. Snead is.
Boy, does that spiced up the quarterback draft situation.
That's really spiced up the conversation.
Would you, if you're a team that's like in position to draft a quarterback, do you maybe move back and sign Zach Wilson? Because Zach Wilson, I don't care what anybody says, he has some film that shows that he's capable of doing it, and he's got plenty of film that shows that he can't do it. But it's that if you're a coach, you see something like that and you think it's natural to think, I can fix that. I can mold that into what I need it to be.
Yeah, I think it's he needs a fresh start too. I think he's in a position now where the Jets do not make sense for him, and yet I still think there's possibilities that he could be a solid quarterback somewhere else. I'm not saying he's going to be he's just going to fly up in production if he goes somewhere else, but I am saying that I do think he has starting potential, and maybe there's just a different coach, quarterback, coordinator, offensive line, wide receiver situation that's better suited for him. So I agree. That one's really interesting. Another one that makes it interesting is Justin Fields. The Justin Fields to Atlanta conversation has really heated up. Some people are saying that's an active conversation, that it's just, dotting I's, crossing T's, and it's a done deal. I don't know if that's accurate. I think those conversations are obviously serious because if you are the Falcons GM and you're Ryan Poles, that conversation is serious just as a result of the situation, regardless. But that's another one to keep an eye on. Shaq Barrett gets released, so Tampa's really doing a pretty big makeover, and then Snead is kind of 50-50 on KC. KC's telling him, hey, go explore other options. Maybe there's a trade fit. We'd like to re-sign you, but like go check out other stuff and then come back to us with a conversation. Very amicable. I think a player as talented as Snead probably appreciates organization doing that. Just saying, hey, go test the market a little bit, go do some speed dating, and then come back to us if you don't feel like things are really a good fit. So anything surprising other than Zach Wilson that you kind of feel like is not expected, or you think guys might be heading towards a different spot? Surprising?
No, but free agency is always crazy, and it's still relatively early in this whole process. So I'm sure news will continue to pop out each day. I always think that around this time, the media is going to get eaten up by combine and draft stuff. Then there's a little break in that. Free agency frenzy becomes the media, and then it switches back full gear into the draft, right?
Right.
And I think we're right in between that phase where it's like
kind of doing both.
Still happening. There's still a lot of buzz about it. We're going to jump into free agency like crazy here in the next couple of weeks, and then it's full draft, full go for the next through April.
Yeah. And so Mark and I, and we're staying on schedule here, right? Last week we had a lot of quarterback conversation. This week we're going to be covering, we'll call it Big Man Monday. We're covering offensive line, baby. I went through and looked at, all the top prospects, watched a good chunk of film on all of them. Former offensive lineman here. I played basically everywhere except center, primarily a guard though, because I am pretty short, unfortunately. But still have a decent eye for the position. So we're going to talk about that. And yeah, the following week we'll do wide receiver draft prospects. And then the week after that, like I said, free agency has started, tampering period's begun, kind of going to know where guys are going. It's going to be a very exciting a couple of weeks there. Always love free agency because like last year, Mark and I were filming and, headlines are popping up about who's getting signed and things like that. So it's good stuff. Any other, new and noteworthy kind of things that we need to talk about around the league, or can we start talking about some of the linemen here going into this draft class?
I think we jump into this offensive line draft class, which is
good stuff. Very deep.
One of the deepest we've seen in a while. John's obviously put together. He's going to go prospect by prospect, and I think when you look at offensive linemen, obviously their production and film, that's going to be their core thing you look at with an offensive lineman. And I think more than people realize, a lot of, people think offensive linemen, big, strong guys, biggest, strongest, take him. No, there's a lot of cerebral stuff that goes on with the offensive line, especially in today's age of zone scheme blocking and communicating up front. And you got to be obviously a freak of nature athletically and size wise to make it to the league as a pro, as a lineman. But the very best of the best separate themselves up here. Okay, much like quarterbacks separate themselves up here, right? How you carry yourself, how you communicate, and how you react to what you see, how you can process information, just as quarterbacks do, offensive linemen do, just as much, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And on that note, Mark, I mean, as I'm going through and watching the film, like some of the biggest compliments I had to pay to some of these guys was their technical ability. Was their ability to identify things, was their ability to pick up blitzes or stunts or things like that. Like, there's guys in here that have way bigger measurables than other guys. Some guys, 2-3 inches and 50 pounds heavier. But, I think being more fundamentally sound, being able to move, being able to identify those things actually is a lot more important. And so, look, I started this thread, right? Who are offensive line needy teams? My list, and Mark, if I missed any, let me know. I have Giants, Jets, Commanders, who all of those are like tackle needy, really tackle needy, and could probably improve in the interior as well. Panthers, who are kind of a mix of both, but mostly need interior. Jags everywhere. Seahawks, interior bad. Saints could probably go interior or tackle. And then Titans, who need tackles really bad. Their interior is actually looking pretty good. They were pretty much bottom ranking teams this past year. And so, again, like just going through and going, I mostly kind of tried to cover guys that are probably going to go in the first 2, maybe 3 rounds here. But as Mark said, like very deep class, really on both tackle and interior offensive line. One of the deepest classes I can remember. All the guys that actually like highlight and talk about in depth here, I legitimately think can be, full-time NFL starters, have long careers. Obviously, we don't know how that's going to pan out. Pros and cons to everybody, but we'll get right into it. So the guy that everybody's talking about is like, the generational prospect, the safest pick in this draft is Joe Alt. Tackled for Notre Dame, multi-year starter. He is 6'8", 325 pounds. And like I said, widely considered the top OT. Alt let up 5 pressures and 1 sack in 368 pass blocking snaps last year. And that's with not a great quarterback as well. So, you're in that pocket for longer, you're defending for longer, those plays are taking longer to develop. And, I said here too, like sometimes, if you're this tall, pad level becomes a concern. You're going to see the way this dude plays. It's not really a concern. His technicals are really, really, really impressive as well. So really biggest knock on him is really the best way to actually generate pressure is through just straight bull rush. I think that's where you see that he struggles the most. And really, frankly, this is a nitpick. And so I kind of grab a screenshot of him getting a little bit top heavy, leaning back, compressing the pocket. You can see number 10, the quarterback's right there. And so, within arm's reach of potentially a sack or a pressure happening. But most of the time I see him kind of stabilize, right? It's like he gives up those yards and then he kind of anchors in and is able to kind of get his feet back under him.
Notice, John, even in your nitpick flaw of him, that guy's still not making the play.
No,
he's
not.
You know what I mean?
All.
He's still creating a clean pocket for the quarterback. It's just like a little bit closer than you'd like him to be. But even in the flaw that you try to look for and find, it's still for most people a pretty good rep.
Well, and completely agree with you. And again, that's exactly why it's a nitpick. And not only that, but like it's crazy because he's so big too that a lot of the times when you watch the film on him, everything seems low effort, and not low effort as in if he's not trying, it's it's easy. It's not difficult for him to just lock a guy up because he's so much bigger than everybody. And he doesn't have to move quite as much to cover as much ground because of how much bigger he is. Right. So you see these pass pro snaps and he's just taken a couple steps and a dude's totally locked up, can't do shit. And again, so really the only thing that you can do is try to outpower him, which there will be guys at the NFL level that can, but I didn't really see, and again, I'm trying to look at some of the more juggernaut teams playing each other. So, Ohio State reps and stuff like that when Notre Dame played them. And even then, those guys that, are potentially NFL talents or things like that are still not totally capable of being able to really get a solid push on him. Like I said, I think he's kind of, the most generational, probably going to be the first offensive lineman off the board. So yeah, very few complaints. You have to get very nitpicky to critique his game. It's probably been this way for a couple of years that people thought he was going to be the first guy taken off the board. Next, we have Olu Fashanu, tackle out of Penn State. He's 6'6", 320 pounds. He left 0 sacks on 382 pass blocking snaps. My biggest thing is I think he's a very well-rounded athlete, and he's super dominant in both run blocking and pass blocking. And I really liked his ability to move too. I think, for a 6'6", 320-pound guy, he was really solid. You could pull him. Biggest area where I'd say there's struggles, and you really see this in the Ohio State tape. You're going to keep every single time anybody talks about this prospect in particular, you're going to hear Ohio State. Struggled at the second level as far as just getting up there and making those blocks. And, in the run game, there's areas where he struggled. I'll show some film here of him. But to me, I think he's really fluid. Like I said, he moves super well. And this pull here, I think, is a great example of that. Coming across and hitting this, I think it's a linebacker that comes in there. It crashes in. It's able to make that block, run right off his butt, and that ends up, I think this play ends up being a 20-25 yard gain. I just think if I can slow it down and stop it right here. His ability to make that pull, anchor up, gets wide feet, strong base, and is just there to make that block. Like that is not an easy play to make whatsoever. You see guards doing this a lot. It's a lot harder to do this effectively as a tackle. And I think this is one of his better reps that he has in the Ohio State game. So I wanted to highlight that. He said his ability to get to the second level is solid, but it really did depend on the talent that he's playing against. This is an Iowa rep that I'm looking at here. So, Michigan, Ohio State, not quite as great. And even here, like he's kind of standing straight up a little bit. I think most of this stuff, though, is pretty overplayed with him as a prospect. I tend to be a pretty big fan of his for the reps that I have watched. Like I said, little inconsistent in the run game against some of the higher tier talent. But pass game, man, I struggled to find a bad rep against both Ohio State and Michigan. Like his ability to anchor, leg placement, feet under him, he was locking guys up. He's really, really talented. Out of all the guys that, and I know, we're going to talk about Fuaga in a second. A lot of people, Joel, and then you kind of have Fuaga and him like, kind of 1A, 1B, or sorry, 2A, 2B in this case. I'd probably favor him. And the reason why is because I think he's a little bit more sound technically. So Fuaga out of Oregon State, pretty similar size. He's about 15 pounds heavier, but really solid right tackle. People kind of have conversations about moving him to guard. I think he's a tackle in the NFL. I just think like the way that he plays, pass pros all there. Like, usually if the tackle, is undersized or something, that's where you kind of have that move to guard conversation. I really don't think that's the case. He's not undersized by any means. He's actually massive. Biggest thing here really is just, I think he needs to clean up his technicals. He's incredibly aggressive. He's like the meanest blocker that I saw out of all the film that I watched. Like, especially, second level pulling, all of that stuff. He's just one of those dudes where it's like, I can imagine like there being chirping, there being people talking shit after the fact because he's just a through the whistle kind of guy.
The very best offensive linemen are assholes.
100%. Yeah. And
assholes.
he gives me that vibe.
Like, you have to be just an absolute dick all the time. When you're in between those lines, like there's no friendliness. There's no. You just have to push people around for 4 quarters and let them know after every snap, I am destroying you over and over again. There's nothing you can do about it. Those are the best linemen I was ever around that I've seen. When you hear stories, when you hear them talk about how they became so great, it's that mentality of we are bullies for 4 quarters, and then once the game finishes, we can be nice or whatever. But the very, very best, the guys that last in this league, they're not very nice when it comes to
and Fuaga
football.
is that profile. He is like the gritty, blocks you through the whistle every single time. Like he's that guy. And it shows up on film. And like I said, like I think his technicals could use some work, but he is like the highest effort, highest grit tackle that I'm seeing out of everybody here. This run game rep from him is really solid. Like I said, finishes through every play, always looking for the next guy to attack. Highlighted right here. Just drives through that. And then this play too, pulling outside, just again, drives through, like does not stop.
He's very fluent to me. Like he runs well.
And his frame too is just ridiculous. I think that's like another point. Like he has like the ideal tackle frame. He's 6'6" and he's just wide. Like,
I think the fact that he can play both guard and tackle is another huge, like, especially in today's offensive line, being able to do that, make that switch, move back and forth, play right, play left. That's becoming more and more of a valuable thing. You look at like Penei Sewell is able to, play inside, outside, right side, left side. Not many guys that can do all of that, but if you can do a few of those things, you're a much more valuable asset to your team.
Yeah, and like I said, like there's debate on whether or not he's going to be the second or third guy taken off the board, but I think like all 3 of these guys I'm talking about right now are like they are going to be expected to be starters in their first year and most likely first round picks as well. And then another guy I want to talk about here is JC Latham, 6'6", 335, so pretty much the same size as Fuaga is. Latham allowed 14 pressures and 2 sacks and 443 pass blocking snaps. To me, this is the technician. Like when I talk about him always just being really consistent as far as like being able to lock guys up, good feet, and cognitively too, right? Mark, you said that's such a massive part of what separates some of these guys. his ability to pick up blitzes, his ability to pick up stunts, his ability to recognize things pre-snap, all elite. I was expecting, because as you know, watching per your hat, right, the Rose Bowl game, Alabama's offensive line struggled a lot versus Michigan. I watch a lot of the reps. It's actually Mims on the other side that was struggling the most. Latham, from all the reps that I watched, actually played a really solid game overall. So yeah, like, his ability to match.
Aside from that last play, John, the last
Right.
he did get beat across his face on the last play, which is again one play, but you remember it because of the the pressure on that moment.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, again, ability to match edge rushers, speed, get square, block the shit out of them, and pass pro might be the best from a technique perspective out of every tackle I've talked about. And I'd say his biggest struggle is, and I think I have some film or a couple pictures of this, is like he looks kind of confused at the second level. Like it's almost like a lot of that stuff that I'm talking about, like deeper in the run game, has to get upfield, stuff like that. He's usually kind of like looking for a guy to block and stuff like that. And so I think that's probably the area that needs the most improvement. Is he kind of needs, like, I don't know what you want to call it, like a script when it comes to a play that's running a little bit long, run game, pass game, or whatever, as far as like, he'll kind of relax, stand up, kind of start looking around. That's probably his biggest like knock, is just kind of if he does get confused, if he feels like, things, aren't going like the way that the play's supposed to, there's times where I can kind of tell he like slows up and needs a second to buffer. Really, I mean, again, like, this was like a couple seconds into this snap. Edge rusher kind of comes around and tries to get around him, and I mean, he makes it look easy. I mean, he's right there, anchored up, ready to go. Nowhere close to the quarterback. And like I said, honestly, I felt bad for the Michigan game because I really think the opposite side of the line was a lot worse. And he can look a little awkward at the second level. Other guys to look at, like I said, Marius Mims. I think he struggled a lot in Michigan. I think that entire left side of the Alabama offensive line was giving up a lot more pressure than the right side was. Kingsley Suamiata, Tyler Goyan, and Jordan Morgan are all guys that are probably going to be, day 2 picks, but are still potentially solid across the board, could potentially develop into starters. So just, ones that I didn't watch as film, do as much research on, but I know are guys, names that are circulating a lot. Just tried to cover the top talent here. So now moving on to interior offensive line. Like I said, you've probably heard of Jackson Powers Johnson at this point, and like for good reason, right? He's the Joe Alt of the interior, 6'3", 320, and only 21 years old. Cognitively, he's totally there, and he's just a damn good football player, man. It was really fun watching these reps. One of my favorites here, gets a chip and then takes a guy in space and blocks the shit out of him and makes this run happen. Like, I mean, you see the running back really didn't.
That's beautiful, dude.
Isn't that an awesome play? Like, I saw this, I was like, come on, perfect.
That is beautiful.
And so, and there's plays like this all the time. And again, he's that guy. Centers usually are like your kind of like, pre-snap, whatever, cognitive leader on the line a lot of the time. And like all those traits are there. He's the one that's pointing out the blitzes. He's the one that's recognizing all the pre-snap stuff. And his awareness, right? I mean, this play is perfect, right? He's like, okay, I need to help up my guard to make sure that there's some space here. And then I immediately one-on-one have to pick up this linebacker by myself. I mean, this is blown up for a tackle for loss if he doesn't make this block. And sure enough, makes a chip before the linebacker gets there, is able to make that block. Running back picks the wrong direction initially here, right? He tries to step inside to this hole, and then he kind of cuts outside. But I mean, if you stop right here, let's say the running back's right here on the hashes. I mean, there's room for him to work with. So I mean, really, running back direction could have been better there, but just the blocking was immaculate. Second level ability. This is another great rep from him. Absolutely love this rep. Right there in the middle. I mean, just blows this dude up, anchors, and just keeps going. I mean, literally pushes.
Take him off the screen.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff you like to see from your top tier offensive line prospects. I mean, he makes that shit look easy. Pancakes the dude 20 yards behind the play. And that's, again, every single game he has reps like this. He's 100% going to be the first interior guy taken off the board, and for good reason. Obviously really good at center, is probably going to be a center, could play guard as well. Like he's versatile and just type of dude that you'd want in your offensive line room, 100%. And again, 21 years old, plenty of room to develop. I mean, already, whatever, 6'3", 320 pounds, but lot to work with in that vein as well. I'm higher on Zinter than probably other people are, and I think it's just because he had a very gruesome injury towards the end of the season. People are kind of worried about where his health is at, going into the season. I think that's going to affect his draft stock. He's probably not going to be, first round pick, second round pick, probably more third or fourth round. He's 6'6", 315. And again, like as far as his cognitive ability goes, he's one of the best in the game. His ability to recognize stuff pre-snap, pick things up. He's an incredible prospect. I think he's one of the best in the country, and I've watched him for 3 years running now. But super consistent in pass protection, calling out stunts, chip blocks to help his teammates out, and then really good in space too, which is just not easy. In general, really, but especially like guards, like that's kind of the separator between guards and tackles, along with their size. A lot of the time is just their ability to handle tough stuff in space like that, one-on-one with guys. He does a great job with that, packing a serious punch in every block. I think I just found like a stretch of 3 plays here. And so I have him, and I say it in the thing, like mock to the Seahawks, I think is really the perfect fit for him. I think Seahawks are super needy at this position. I think he'd be a great fit for it. Let's see, get this playing. I mean, again, one-on-one here, blocks the shit out of the dude. I think the next one's going to be a pulling snap that he takes. Yep. Round. Just super solid. Corum turns that into a super long run. And then, this one's great too, right? Blocks 2 guys in the same play. I mean, just completely takes them both out of the play. Here, I'll back it up and restart that. Sorry. Right here. Solid block, sees that his tackle's got help, looks for the next guy, takes out 51, could probably take.
Oh my God.
Immediately looks to 23 after that too.
Yeah.
It's off.
But I think one thing to note too, John, is you talk about the the smart, right? The smarts of these guys. Their attention to detail, their understanding of the run play behind them, understanding where the ball is trying to go, understanding the threats, the immediate threat, the secondary threat to that run play. And I think Coach Jerome Moore, one of the best offensive line minds there is in the world. He was at the combine sitting there talking to guys, talking about why this offensive line unit was so special, why the guys that have come out of Michigan have done so well translating their game from college to pro. And really, it's just a preparation. A lot of the scouts are saying that when they sit down and they meet with these Michigan prospects, they are as smart and sound like when they speak to them, they show them film, they ask them questions. It sounds a lot like a lot of these guys are 5 to 6 year vets, like NFL vets. He said they're just light years ahead of these other scouts from other teams. And it's a common trend. It's not just 1 or 2 Michigan guys that are standing out. Like they are ahead of these other schools in terms of developing these guys, not only fundamentally, but understanding mentally the part of the game, the part of the position that they're playing. And I think that's a hats off, to Michigan, their coaching staff, Jim Harbaugh, Jerome Moore, and what they chose to commit to. And that was, we're going to commit to power football. We're going to beat you up front in the trenches, and we're going to allow our special guys in the backfield to have easy lives because our front guys, our offensive line guys, are going to create good, clean pocket to throw the ball in, but also we're going to be able to run the ball down your throat.
Yeah, I'm going to feel pretty comfortable as a running back and a quarterback. I mean, like I said, on this pass pro, right? Like I'm going to feel pretty good if my guard can take 3 guys out of the pass rush just by himself, pretty much. I mean, just textbook kind of play. And again, same thing with Powers Johnson. Like he's just exact same thing where it's like, just because he blocks one guy, just because he takes one guy out of the play, like his immediate mentality is to just focus up on the next person that he can take out of the play. And I agree with you, Mark. Like I think, Michigan had the best offensive line unit in the country last year. And I think that's a great testament to their coaching. It's not just their physical ability, it's their cognitive ability as well. These next 2 that I cover here both played tackle, but are most likely due to their size going to shift into guard at the NFL level. First one's Washington's Troy Fautanu, 6'4", 320 pounds. So, come in just a couple inches shorter than some of these other top prospects we're talking about. He could get drafted as a tackle. It sounds like he's gunning more to be drafted as a guard. Could play, on both slots, as Mark's saying, like, having that versatility super important. He started at guard at Washington and then played the last 2 years at tackle. And again, make no mistake about his size. He's really aggressive. He's athletic. He blocks through the whistle. And he's frankly tougher to grade. Really, both of these next two guys are, because of the fact that most of the reps are at tackle. So sometimes, like, in pass pro against some of these edge rushers, things like that, like, he's good, lock guys up, all of that stuff, but it's just a lot tougher to grade. Like, okay, where are they going to be on the interior and how is that? But the thing is their lives are easier on the interior. There's more bodies flying around. You have more help. Like, this is the toughest position you can be in as an offensive lineman, is one-on-one with an edge rusher. Like, that's where you're going to get the most exposed. It's, the offensive line equivalent of being a corner that gets beat over top is, not being able to block an edge rusher one-on-one. But I still think he's going to be a solid draft pick. Again, probably, like early day 2 pick, most likely, is probably where he's going to end up. And then finally, Graham Barton, who's 6'5", 314. He's played everywhere at the offensive line, center, guard, tackle. Same thing, though. Played mostly at left tackle. And Barton's measurables, with him being just a little bit shorter than some of these other guys, a little bit lighter than some of these other guys, he's probably going to end up playing guard. I'm going to be honest, like, he's ranked as like the 3rd, 4th, 5th, usually, like, offensive guard in this draft class. I looked at a lot of the film and was not super stoked on what I was seeing. Again, him at tackle, maybe it's just not the right fit. Maybe he's more of a guard. 11 pressures and 2 sacks on 258 pass pro snaps. He's really aggressive. He can get a strong push, but I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is just a lot of like sloppiness on the blocks where guys will slide off of him pretty easily. He can look uncomfortable in pass pro sometimes. He'll overextend. He'll really just try to, sorry for punching the camera there, but instead of getting his feet under him, he will just get top heavy and kind of throw his arms at a guy.
You never want that forward lean like that.
No, this is not solid at all. So really, like, and there's a lot of pass pro snaps that kind of have, he's leaning down, pushing his head down, kind of trying to come at him like Frankenstein. That's not going to translate well to the NFL level. I think that's one of the reasons why there's concern about him playing tackle at the NFL level, is because this is not going to fly. Like, an edge rusher is going to crush you every single time if that's how you're coming at them, and you're gonna not only embarrass yourself, but probably get your quarterback murdered as well. And there was a couple run blocks too, similar thing and I kind of have it here, just like, just kind of sliding off of guys. So something to keep an eye out. I'm not saying, again, these are maybe things that you can develop and fix. Like, I saw this happen. It's definitely habitual on film, and it's something to kind of be cognizant of, as, kind of assess some of these other prospects. Like I said, aggression is there, effort is there, but, technically speaking, I think he needs to get his feet under him and set a better base for himself. Slides off of guys. And then other guys to talk about: Cooper, I think it's Beep, 6'4", Christian Mahogany, really cool last name. And then Cedric Van Pran, who's the Georgia's interior guy, all solid dudes that, could eventually develop into NFL caliber.
John, how much of it went into, because those 3 names are sweet, how much of that is why those 3 names were stood out compared to like other, like
all same on the rankings? I think but I do agree, all 3 of those names look, I'd like names. A Christian Mahogany, like, it just sounds like a sick interior offensive lineman name for sure. So yeah, that's pretty much the summation of the research I did. Mark is usually the film guy here, but like I said, tackles and guards are more in my wheelhouse. And one of the deepest classes, like I said, a lot of those guys that I covered, I do think are going to pan out in the NFL. I definitely have some concerns about Barton, but really all the rest of those guys that I talked about, yes, like you're, different levels of development. You're maybe getting different flavors out of certain guys, but I think all of them are legitimate, like NFL starter caliber tackles. And we started with quarterbacks, deep class there, tackles this week, and the next week we're going to do wide receivers, which is, Mark, I'm really excited for you to cover receivers. For those that don't know, Mark played receiver at Central Michigan, has a really good eye for it. I learn something new every single time we do receiver film, and there's 10 guys that you can probably cover?
There's a lot of guys that are going to be covered. It's a deep class. If you ever think when you come in, tune into practice squad, that, the film's only me, or that the gambling advice is only me or the football IQ is only me. I hope that this episode taught you that Jon is much, much more capable than you think that he may be if you haven't been watching this as a whole. If you only watch the shorts that I do on Aliens, or if you only watch the film breakdowns that I do in the short form, that is just simply not correct if you think it's just me behind the scenes.
And I'll kind of do a player profile on some of those higher tier guys and post them as shorts as well. Because, that's a position people are not paying attention to and yet maybe matters more than any other position. I mean, who you draft as your left tackle has massive implications towards what the rest of your team is able to do. And then, we'll probably cover edge rushers after free agency, but that's another one I'm excited to do. That class isn't quite as deep, but I think, there's
some
guys that are definitely,
there's definitely some guys
stuff to the table. Exactly. So yeah, guys, that was Big Man Monday, covering a little combine stuff, covering a little bit of free agency news. We'll be back next week with receivers. And then, like I said, free agency after that, very exciting time period in the NFL. I always love free agency. And especially, Mark and I are very familiar with a lot of the different guys along the leads, what skill set they kind of bring to each team, how needy those skill sets are, right? Lions and what they do about their corner situation is absolutely massive. For example, there's teams, Tampa and their edge rushing situation. They might go to the draft for that one, but questions there. There's a lot of good stuff that happens in free agency that really can shape the future of a team. Because draft, right? You're thinking future there. Free agency, those are immediate needs that need to get fixed now, basically. Mark, anything else from you?
No, man. That was a great Big Man Monday. Big guys don't get enough love. They don't get enough love on this podcast. They don't get enough love in the media. They just don't get enough love, period. But we're going to try to change that.
Yeah. Garbage men, right? Everybody needs them, but nobody apparently wants to acknowledge them. So it's the mantra with offensive linemen. We got a shitty, dirty job to do, but it's one of the most important ones. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see you guys next week to cover wide receiver draft prospect film. Peace.
See you guys.